The Bible and Archaeology, The Great Civilizations of the Past. Part 2, Egypt. Episode 3, Joseph in Egypt, Simple Myth or Historical Fact? Can modern research confirm the truth behind biblical stories? Join us on an exciting journey as we explore the archaeological evidence that sheds light on the fascinating story of Joseph in Egypt. Many consider the account of Joseph, sold into slavery and later elevated to power by Pharaoh, as mere fable. But what if we told you there are surprising discoveries that suggest the presence of Joseph and his family in Egypt, and that some astonishing finds align with specific details of Joseph's story? In the last 2 episodes of this series, available on our Mankind Roots channel, we first explored how, by following the biblical narrative, the origins of Egyptian civilization began to take shape. Then, guided by the biblical account of Abraham's journey to Egypt nearly 4,000 years ago, we marveled at the connections between this biblical episode and murals found in Egyptian tombs, as well as Egyptian literature from that time. In this video, we take a leap forward in time by about 2 centuries. We arrive in the 18th century BCE in the fascinating world of the pharaohs. However, our protagonist is not a powerful ruler, but a young and humble Hebrew shepherd, Joseph. The story of Joseph in Egypt has captivated generations, inspired blockbuster films, and served as an enduring example of resilience, faithfulness, and devotion to God. Nevertheless, its authenticity has been repeatedly questioned, with critics dismissing it as mere entertainment for children. In this video, we will delve into empty tombs that still have much to reveal, as well as statues found in Egypt of rulers who were not Egyptian, raising numerous questions about their historical context. We will also explore evidence of a non-Egyptian community in a region mentioned in the biblical text and objects associated with foreign residents in Egypt. We will analyze these discoveries in light of the biblical account, evaluating how the presence of Semitic peoples could have created the perfect context for Joseph's story. Don't miss this video if you want to discover how archaeology can deepen our understanding of the Bible's historical content and reveal the incredible connection between ancient stories and material evidence. Subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and give us a like if you're interested in continuing to explore the fascinating intersection between archaeology and the Bible, uncovering the roots of humanity. The biblical narrative devotes about 20 chapters to Joseph's story, found in Genesis from chapter 30 to chapter 50. Nevertheless, we think it's appropriate to provide you with a brief summary below. Joseph was born into a large family and was his father Jacob's favorite son. On one occasion, Jacob had a tunic of bright, colorful stripes made for Joseph, which sparked envy among his brothers. Joseph's dreams, which foretold that he would one day have authority over them, further aggravated the situation. Overcome by anger and jealousy, his brothers sold him as a slave to merchants traveling to Egypt. In Egypt, Joseph was purchased by Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. The story illustrates how God blessed Joseph's actions. Despite being a slave, Joseph stood out for his hard work and honesty, earning Potiphar's respect and trust. Potiphar entrusted him with the management of his household. However, Potiphar's wife attempted to seduce Joseph, and when he rejected her, she falsely accused him of attempted assault. This accusation led to Joseph's imprisonment. Even in prison, Joseph earned the trust of the prison warden thanks to his good behavior and unwavering faith in God. While there, he interpreted the dreams of 2 fellow prisoners, predictions that came true with precision. Joseph's ability to interpret dreams reached Pharaoh, who summoned him to decipher dreams that were troubling him. Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, predicting 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine. Impressed by Joseph's humility and faith in God, Pharaoh appointed him administrator of Egypt, granting him power and responsibility to prepare the country for the impending crisis. The famine affected many regions, including Canaan, where Jacob and his sons lived. Desperate for food, Joseph's brothers traveled to Egypt to buy grain. Without recognizing their brother in the powerful Egyptian administrator, understandably so, as about 20 years had passed since they last saw him, they bowed before him, just as Joseph had dreamed years earlier. After a series of tests to assess his brother's repentance, Joseph revealed his identity to them. Moved by his family's plight, he forgave them and invited them to live in Egypt along with their father. Jacob and his entire family settled in Egypt under Joseph's protection. Egypt overcame the famine, and before his death, Jacob blessed his sons, acknowledging Joseph and his descendants. This episode left an indelible mark on the history of the people of Israel, and by extension, on those who, through the centuries and into the present day, have embraced this story as truth, influencing the hearts and minds of millions. What evidence exists for the biblical account of Joseph in Egypt? To begin, let us place ourselves on the timeline and determine how we can establish the date when Joseph arrived in Egypt. We will uncover this date by following the chronological clues contained in the biblical record. In our previous installment, we saw that Abraham moved to Egypt between the years 1946 and 1932 BCE. Abraham was the 10th generation from Noah through Shem and was born 352 years after the flood. Thanks to the chronology in the book of Genesis, we can establish that Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldeans in the year 2018 BCE. This was also covered in part 1 of our series, The Bible and Archaeology Mesopotamia, which you can find on our channel. When Abraham was 100 years old and under miraculous circumstances, his wife Sarah, who had been barren until then, bore him a son named Isaac. This occurred in 1918 BCE. At the age of 60, Isaac and Rebekah had twins, Esau and Jacob, the father of Joseph. This event took place in 1858 BCE. After many complications and deceptions from his father-in-law Laban, Jacob became the father of Joseph, born to his favorite wife Rachel, when Jacob was 91 years old, placing this event in 1767 BCE. When Joseph was sold as a slave to the Ishmaelites, he was approximately 17 years old. Therefore, we can place Joseph's arrival in Egypt around the year 1750 BCE. Is there any significant event in 18th century BCE Egypt that we can link to the biblical account of Joseph? Historians agree that around the 18th century BCE, the continuous immigration of peoples from Canaan culminated in the Semitic invasion, which eventually led to the capture of Avaris, a city located in the region the Bible calls Goshen, where the Israelites lived for 215 years, from 1728 to 1513 BCE. Around 1650 BCE, at the end of the Middle Kingdom, Egypt faced a period of crisis. During this time, a foreign people known as the Hyksos emerged as a dominant force in the Nile Delta, marking the beginning of the Second Intermediate Period. But who exactly were the Hyksos? The term Hyksos comes from the Egyptian Heka-Kasut, meaning rulers of foreign lands. They were a group of Western Semites, possibly originating from Canaan, who took advantage of Egypt's weakened state to infiltrate and eventually govern the region. Their rise was not a violent invasion, as it is often portrayed, but rather a gradual process of immigration and conquest. Among the most notable Hyksos kings were Cylindrical, regarded as the first ruler of the 15th dynasty, and Apophis I, who consolidated power in Lower Egypt. Under their rule, the Hyksos introduced significant innovations, such as the use of horses and chariots in warfare, new weapons, and advances in metallurgy. These military tools gave the Hyksos a tactical advantage over the Egyptians, transforming the way battles were fought. An intriguing question is the possible relationship between the Hyksos and the Hebrews. Some classical historians, such as Manetho, an Egyptian priest from the Hellenistic period, identified the Hyksos as predecessors of the Israelites due to their Semitic origins and subsequent expulsion from Egypt. Flavius Josephus, a 1st century Jewish historian referencing Manetho, argued that the Hyksos were foreigners who invaded Egypt, established their rule, and were later expelled. He referred to them as shepherd kings, from the Egyptian Heka-Kasut, meaning chieftains of foreign lands. Josephus, interpreting Manetho's account, suggested that the Hyksos might have had connections with the Hebrew people, though this is debated by modern historians. Manetho also described the Hyksos as barbaric invaders, but archaeological records reveal that they quickly adopted Egyptian culture, including its religion and administrative systems. They lived in cities like Avaris, which became their capital, and left a mixed legacy. Foreigners who ruled Egypt yet became deeply integrated into its society. It is noteworthy that the Egyptians eventually expelled the Hyksos under the leadership of Ahmose-Erpirent, founder of the New Kingdom. This victory marked the rebirth of a unified Egypt and the end of foreign rule. Remarkably, this episode corresponds to the biblical Exodus period, which biblical chronology places in 1513 BCE. Evidence of Semitic peoples settling during the period when the Bible situates Joseph in Egypt is demonstrated by an interesting discovery currently housed in the Brooklyn Museum. The Brooklyn Papyrus 35.1446, an important document from ancient Egypt. The papyrus dates back to the Middle Kingdom, specifically between 1809 and 1743 BCE. According to biblical chronology, Joseph arrived in Egypt in 1750 BCE, placing this artifact in the same era. The papyrus is written on both sides. On the front, it lists 80 individuals who apparently escaped from an institution called the Great Prison Labor Camp. The document records their names, their fathers' names, a high-ranking official, the place or institution to which they originally belonged, their gender, and administrative notes about their status. On the back of the papyrus is a list of servants and Asiatics sold by a woman named Senebtisi. The papyrus is of great interest to researchers because it contains many Semitic names, which the Egyptians referred to as Asiatics, including Menahema. Similar to the Hebrew name Menahem, meaning comforter. This name appears in the Bible as one of the kings of Israel, who ruled for 10 years, approximately around 790 BCE. Some of the names included in the list, such as Issachar, Asher, Mina, and Shiphrah, are clearly of Hebrew origin. These same names also appear among biblical characters, serving as undeniable evidence of the presence of Hebrews during that time. In Moses' era, Shiphrah was one of the midwives who protected the lives of male children. Other Semitic names include Sakara, related to the Hebrew sakar, meaning reward or wage. Asherah, associated with the Semitic goddess Asherah, possibly reflecting religious beliefs brought by these peoples. Anani, a Semitic name that may derive from the Hebrew Anan, meaning cloud. The Bible also mentions the variant Anani. Aparel, though Egyptian in structure, contains Semitic elements, such as the particle El, meaning God in Hebrew and Aramaic. This name is clearly recognized as Hyksos and reminds us of the Chatti, vizier or second in command, during the reign of Amenhotep III. These names illustrate the cultural diversity and interaction between Egyptians and Semitic peoples. Moreover, they reflect how these foreign communities became integrated into the social and economic fabric of Egypt during that time. The appearance of Semitic names in the Brooklyn Papyrus 35.1446 serves as compelling evidence of the significant presence of foreigners of Semitic origin in Egypt during the 13th dynasty. This archaeological discovery not only confirms the existence of a foreign population within Egyptian territory, but also provides a historical framework consistent with the biblical account of Joseph and his family settling in Egypt. This documented evidence strengthens the historical credibility of the events described in the Bible, suggesting that the story of Joseph is not merely a myth or legend, but rather fits into a real and plausible context where interactions between Egyptians and Semites were frequent and profound. Another document that draws our attention is the Turin Canon, housed in the Egyptian Museum of Turin, from which it takes its name. The Turin Royal Canon, also known as the Turin Royal Papyrus or Turin King List, is a highly valuable historical papyrus written in hieratic script. The text is dated to the time of Ramses II, around the 13th century BCE, though it may have been written later. On one side, the Turin Royal Canon contains a list of names of people and institutions, as well as what appears to be an estimate of tributes. However, the most important information is found on the other side of the papyrus, where it lists gods, demigods, spirits, mythical kings, and human rulers who governed Egypt. This list includes the names of rulers from the beginning of time up to the period when the document was composed, along with the duration of their reigns. The Turin Royal Canon is a fundamental document for understanding the chronology of ancient Egypt, as it provides a list of rulers believed to have governed since the beginning of Egyptian civilization. The document places the Hyksos rulers within the 15th and 16th dynasties, allowing us to situate their reign in the chronology of ancient Egypt and better understand the historical context of their rule. In particular, the 15th dynasty, governed by the Hyksos from the city of Avaris, reached its peak approximately between 1650 and 1550 BCE. The 16th Egyptian dynasty, approximately 1650–1580 BCE, coexisted with the 15th dynasty, ruled by the Hyksos. While the Hyksos controlled Lower Egypt from the Nile Delta, the 16th dynasty ruled from Thebes in Upper Egypt. Although the names of the Hyksos rulers were not inscribed within the cartouches that traditionally frame the names of pharaohs, the hieroglyphic text Heka was added to indicate their status as foreign rulers. This demonstrates that the scribe of the Turin royal canon was aware of the non-Egyptian origin of these rulers and clearly distinguished them from native pharaohs. This detail, along with other historical records, confirms the presence of Semitic foreigners in Egypt during this period. Their presence aligns with the biblical time frame of Joseph and his family in Egypt, offering a historical context that reinforces the connection between biblical texts and archaeological evidence. This unique situation of a mixed population in Egypt with foreign rulers might explain certain intriguing biblical statements, such as the one found in Genesis 39 verses 1–2. Now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and an Egyptian named Potiphar, a court official of Pharaoh and chief of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. But Jehovah was with Joseph. As a result, he became successful and was put over the house of his master, the Egyptian. Why specify that Potiphar was Egyptian? Evidently, in the social context of the time, it could not be assumed that everyone was Egyptian. Potiphar might well have been a foreigner, such as a Hyksos, for instance. Using both the biblical record and available Egyptian documents, we have been able to place Joseph's family in Egypt within the timeline. Is it possible to find conclusive evidence identifying the places where the Hebrews settled in Egypt? Let us explore what the biblical references suggest. In Genesis 45:10, we find the message that Joseph sends to his father Jacob. "You must dwell in the land of Goshen, where you will be near me, you, your sons, your grandsons, your flocks, your herds, and everything you have." The land of Goshen. Its precise location is uncertain, although it is believed to have been in the eastern part of the Nile Delta, near the border of Egypt. This is deduced because, when Joseph went out to meet his father, who was traveling to Egypt from Canaan, he met him in the region of Goshen, meaning in the eastern part of the Nile, the first place in Egypt that one coming from Canaan would reach. On the other hand, the Greek translation of the Septuagint indicates that Goshen was near the Wadi Tumilat, the same region of Egypt. For about 30 years, Austrian archaeologist Manfred Bietak and his team have been conducting excavations in the city of Avaris, the recognized capital of the Hyksos. Excavations in Avaris have revealed fascinating information about the history of the Hyksos in Egypt. Avaris, the ancient capital of the Hyksos, was discovered near the modern city of Tel El Daba in the Nile Delta. The Austrian archaeologists used radar and geophysical studies to identify parts of the city. Avaris is believed to have had a population of between 25,000 and 30,000 people and covered an area of 250 hectares. The excavations in Avaris have revealed that the city was inhabited by a large population of Semites from Canaan. In addition, Canaanite pottery, daggers, and other objects have been found, evidencing the Semitic culture in the city. Archaeologist Manfred Bietak, who has led the excavations in Avaris for over 30 years, states that the inhabitants of Avaris enjoyed a special regime of privileges granted by the pharaoh, something that reminds us of the position Joseph held in the pharaoh's court. In this site, a large, typically Canaanite house has been excavated, which was later converted into a palace. This suggests that the original owner of the house was a wealthy individual who later rose in social rank. The excavations have revealed features that could be directly linked to Jacob's family, according to the broader context of the biblical account. This account states that Jacob was given the name Israel, and from then on, all his descendants were identified by this name as a nation, the nation of Israel. His 12 sons gave rise to the 12 tribes of Israel, who later, upon settling in Palestine or Canaan, divided the territory and formed the nation of Israel. Thus, the number 12 has acquired symbolic significance in biblical history. Is there any evidence of this in the palace of Avaris? In front of the governor's palace in Avaris, the courtyard had 12 sturdy columns, quite a coincidence, which does not end here. Behind the palace, in a square area, there were 12 mausoleums. This architectural detail is particularly intriguing, since, as mentioned, the number 12 is associated with the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 sons of Jacob. One of the mausoleums stands out for its features. It belongs to a more important figure, is larger than the others, has a small pyramid, an architecture that was reserved and associated with the pharaohs, and inside, the remains of a statue were found that must have been about 3 meters tall. The reconstruction of the image allowed for the determination that it belonged to a Semitic ruler, like the Hebrews. This is inferred from its features, such as the mushroom-shaped hairstyle and the vertically striped tunic of vivid colors, similar to the mural depicted in the tomb of Beni Hassan, dating back to the time of Abraham, which we analyzed in our previous episode, and like the one Jacob gave his son Joseph, which sparked the envy of his brothers. It is reasonable to assume that, after his death, Joseph would have preferred to be remembered for his Hebrew origin, with his characteristic attire, rather than for his past as an Egyptian official. The tomb was empty, the body of the deceased was missing. This exactly matches Joseph's wishes. According to the biblical account, before he died, Joseph asked that the Israelites take his bones to Canaan when they left Egypt. The text of Joshua 24 verse 32 confirms the fulfillment of his request. The bones of Joseph, which the Israelites had brought up out of Egypt, were buried in Shechem in the portion of the field that Jacob had acquired from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money, and it became the inheritance of the sons of Joseph. It is true that the story of Joseph contains some elements that might perplex us, such as the fact that a pharaoh would grant so much power to a foreigner from a different culture. This included his god, Jehovah, not recognized by the Egyptians for rivaling the pantheon of Egyptian deities, his humble origin as a shepherd, and not to mention the infamous accusation of rape coming from an Egyptian woman. It is possible that an Egyptian pharaoh might have looked down on his background. However, as we have seen during Joseph's time, the Hyksos, the foreign rulers, were beginning to exert notable influence in Lower Egypt, which culminated in their complete domination of the region. Notably, the Hyksos were distinguished by their military preparedness, and we might relate them to the Arameans or the Assyrians, highly militarized peoples. While it is unlikely they were the Assyrians, who by the 2nd millennium BC had gained considerable autonomy in the region, we can relate the Hyksos to the Arameans, excluding the Canaanites, such as the Amorites, Jebusites, Sidonians, etc., as they were peoples of Hamitic origin, unless we wanted to include them among the Semitic peoples solely for geographical affinity. If the Hyksos were related to the Arameans and Canaanites, Joseph would certainly have found himself in a favorable position. His great-grandfather Abraham had lived in Haran until the age of 75. In fact, the Bible also refers to him as Abraham the Aramean. Joseph's father, Jacob, had lived about 20 years in Haran and married an Aramean, Rachel, making Joseph half Aramean. Would a Hyksos pharaoh, familiar with the Arameans, have granted special powers to a half-Aramean Hebrew like Joseph? By following the biblical chronology and historical facts, we see how the biblical narrative appears logical and coherent. This should not diminish the importance of the biblical account, particularly when it emphasizes that Joseph received this special treatment not because of his ethnic background, but because of his attitude and God's blessing. This historical coincidence within the political and social context of Egypt at that time also sheds light on a biblical episode that some have questioned. It is mentioned in Genesis 47 verse 7. Then Joseph brought in Jacob his father and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. An elderly Hebrew shepherd blessing an Egyptian pharaoh? To many, this episode might seem improbable. The pharaoh was considered the son of Ra, the sun god, and was frequently associated with Horus, the sky god and protector of the throne. Upon his death, Pharaoh was identified with Osiris, the god of resurrection and the afterlife, granting him divine status both in life and death. A living god receiving a blessing from a Hebrew shepherd? Impossible. But what if the pharaoh in question was a foreign ruler, a Hyksos, a Semite like Jacob? In such a case, the situation would have been different. The Hyksos, being of Semitic origin, shared similar cultural traditions, including profound respect for elders. In many cities of ancient Palestine, elders played prominent roles in resolving civil cases, and their decisions were obeyed with reverence. This could explain the respect with which Pharaoh received Jacob's blessing. It would not have been a simple courtesy, but a recognition of Jacob's status as a respected patriarch in a tradition common among Semitic peoples. The governor's palace at Avaris, dating to Joseph's historical period, with its 12 columns and 12 tombs, as well as the statue of a Semitic ruler with astonishing details corresponding to the biblical description of Joseph, are not the only findings in Avaris that capture our attention. In antiquity, seals were essential tools used by individuals of certain prestige and social importance. They served to authenticate documents, such as commercial contracts or various types of agreements. In Avaris, seals of different kinds have been discovered, including several scarab-shaped seals with inscriptions bearing the name Jacob in its Semitic form, Yaakov HR. In other cases, the same name appeared as part of compound names. It is not improbable that Jacob, being in charge of a fertile region, might have possessed a personal seal to validate commercial and administrative agreements, which aligns with the common practice of that time. Other seals were cylindrical in shape and designed so that, when rolled over a soft surface like clay, the engraved image would be precisely imprinted. In the palace of the Semitic dignitary of Avaris, a cylindrical seal has been found that surprises us with the symbols it contains. To our astonishment, these symbols can be associated with 12 distinct components, the 12 tribes of Israel. This seal, also called a bulla, features a series of symbols that some interpret as representations of the 12 tribes of Israel, based on Jacob's blessings in Genesis 49 and Deuteronomy 33. Let us analyze some of these symbols and describe their possible connections to the biblical text. Deuteronomy 33 verse 17 states the following about Joseph. His splendor is like that of a firstborn bull, and his horns are the horns of a wild bull. With them he will push peoples altogether to the ends of the earth. They are the tens of thousands of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. The bull, depicted in the image in an attacking position, with both horns clearly defined, represents Joseph with his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. This suggests the dominant position of Joseph's clan in Egypt. Genesis 49 verses 3 and 4. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my vigor and the beginning of my procreative power, the excellence of dignity and the excellence of strength. With recklessness like turbulent waters, you will not excel because you have gone up to your father's bed. At that time you defiled my bed. He actually went on to it. This symbol is interpreted as Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, described as unstable as turbulent waters. His position beneath Joseph's bull suggests Joseph's superiority over Reuben, who, as the firstborn, is displaced to an inferior position compared to Joseph's clan. Genesis 49 verses 9 and 10. Judah is a lion cub. From the prey, my son, you will certainly go up. He has crouched down and stretched himself out like a lion, and like a lion, who dares rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, neither the commander's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him the obedience of the peoples will belong. This symbol represents Judah, described as a lion cub. In the front of the lion's image, a staff is visible. Could it be the staff that will not depart from Judah, as described in the biblical text? A striking reference to Judah's prominence, as the nation of Israel would later be known as the Jewish nation. Additionally, it provides a clear reference to the messianic lineage, anthropomorphic figure atop two peaks. This symbol is interpreted as Joseph, standing above the two mountains flanking Shechem, the city that Jacob granted to Joseph. The interpretation favoring Joseph is based on the significance of Shechem as the most cherished part of his inheritance. Genesis 49:17. Let Dan be a serpent by the roadside, a horned snake beside the path that bites the heels of the horse so that its rider falls backward. Serpent. This symbol represents Dan, described as a serpent by the roadside. Deuteronomy 33:24. Of Asher, he said, Blessed with sons is Asher. May he be favored by his brothers, and may he dip his feet in oil. Olive branch. This symbol could represent Asher, blessed with a land rich in olive trees. The branch has 8 leaves, which may reference Asher's position as Jacob's 8th son. Asher was promised a life filled with abundance and rich foods, a promise that the history of his descendants confirms. Genesis 49:13. Zebulun will reside by the seashore, by the shore where the ships lie anchored, and his remote border will be toward Sidon. Boat with mushrooms. This symbol is interpreted as representing Zebulun blessed with the riches of the sea. The mushrooms, considered a royal delicacy in Egypt, could symbolize the wealth of maritime trade. The interpretation of the bulla as a seal representing the 12 tribes of Israel, with Joseph in a prominent position, supports the hypothesis that the palace at Tel el-Daba was Joseph's residence during his time in Egypt. By drawing from the biblical narrative and available evidence, we have uncovered details about the period during which Joseph and his family settled in Egypt. Research has performed an extraordinary task in uncovering elements that allow us to reconstruct details about the lives of those who were key figures in biblical stories. However, as with all human sciences, it has its limitations, ranging from difficulties in dating and interpreting samples within the correct historical context to establishing a reliable chronological timeline. Thanks to the biblical narrative, this documentary has allowed us to determine the year Joseph set foot in Egypt when he was sold into slavery by his brothers, 1750 BCE. We have seen that accepted historical accounts corroborate, in a compelling way, the social context of Egypt described in the biblical account. This proves that during Joseph's time, the migration of Semitic populations from Canaan to Egypt occurred frequently, as evidenced by Egyptian documents from the period containing Semitic names of Hebrew origin. Following the biblical account that declares that Jacob's family settled in Egypt, more precisely in the Nile Delta, in Goshen, in the year 1728 BC, we focus on the findings at Avaris, the capital city of the Hyksos, where excavations have revealed objects of clear Canaanite craftsmanship. We are then surprised by the palace of a governor, a palace in which 12 columns were found in its inner courtyard, and in the square perimeter of the same palace, 12 mausoleums, the most important of which included a small pyramid and a 3-meter-high statue representing not an Egyptian, but a Semite who had been an important figure. In the palace, a cylinder was found with symbols that can be associated with the 12 tribes of Israel, and other findings speak of seals in the shape of a scarab with the name Jacob engraved on them. All of this corresponds to the time and place where Jacob's family settled in Egypt according to the Bible. Joseph in Egypt. Simple myth or historical fact? Let the evidence presented in this documentary answer that question, in which we have covered a period that is lost in the mists of time, a distant event that takes us back to our roots, the roots of humanity. In the next video, we will talk about the Exodus. What does historical and archaeological evidence say about the exodus of Israel from Egypt? Discover how modern research approaches one of the most fascinating stories of antiquity. Don't miss it! If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel by clicking the red button so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. Your support makes all the difference. See you in the next video.